YouTube. This is Lindsay from Lindsay Reads, and I thought I would make a video today about the books I finished in January, so far in January, like a mid-month wrap-up. I thought this would be a good way for you to get to know me through the books I read. Like I said before, I read any genre, and you'll see this with the books I've completed so far in the month of January. So the first book I have finished is a comic book by Charles M. Schulz. It's Peanuts. And here is a picture of the cover. It was an easy first read of the year. I love reading the comics and newspaper clips on Sunday mornings, and I thought, I was browsing through my library and I saw this pop up as like a recommendation, so let me just check that out. I enjoyed it. I plan to read more of Adventures of Charlie Brown. It was just like a light, easy read. It made me laugh a couple times, which I kind of surprised by it. I don't know why, but I was surprised that it made me laugh out loud. So I highly recommend it. It's a light, easy comic, similar to the TV shows and the comic strips in the newspaper. And then the second book I read, it wasn't a comic, it was a non-fiction biography of Jane. It's called Jane Austen at Home by Lucy Worsley, and here's a cover of that book. And it's made its rounds on BookTube quite a bit. I heard about it from a couple of different channels. I've read almost all of Jane Austen's books except for Mansfield Park. I plan to read that later this year, especially from reading this biography. Made me really want to pick up the rest of her books and her juvenilia. She had a really interesting life. It made her feel like a real person, of course, than just an author. So yeah, I highly recommend that one. It was an easy read. It wasn't too dense of a biography to get into. And I wouldn't say you have to read all of her books to enjoy this one. If anything, it'd make you pick up more of her books if you haven't read, or it would make you want to reread them. The third book I read is called One Person, No Vote by Carol Anderson. It's how voter suppression is destroying our democracy. And here's, sorry for the glare, hopefully you can see that. So there's that book. It's basically what it says on the cover. It's about the racial discrimination in the U.S. And how we have gerrymandered the lines, and it's not just that, but it's how back in with the civil rights era, how they in the Jim Crow laws, how they were preventing the black people from voting, like threatening them or kicking them out, not letting them go in to vote, and how that is still going on today, basically, in some areas. And so if you want to learn more about how certain presidents are elected, and how that can be possible even though the popular vote doesn't always match up, and how different counties can sway the end results. So yeah, it's an interesting book. Yeah, if you want to more like political history, current political standings. It was really well written. I highly recommend it. The next book I read was a huge shift from that. It was a children's book called Make Way for Ducklings. It was a light, simple story, really short, about a family of ducks and how they're making their way through the city. It's a really short book. It's perfect for children. I listened to it on audio, actually. The next book I read is called Noughts and Crosses by Ian Rankin. It's the first book in a series called the Rebus series, Inspector Rebus novel. This is the first one in the series, the first one I picked up. It was really good. It was really suspenseful about a guy Inspector Rebus, who was in the British SAS, like an elite military operation, and the trauma that he has dealt with, and then he's come back to live as a civilian, and it's kind of warped his mind. But he's now working as a cop, and he's investigating something that's seems to be targeted just to him, and so he's trying to figure out why that is, and it kept me on my toes. It was really, really suspenseful. And then this next book I read, I was in a mystery kick. It's Chocolate Chip Cookie Murder. Oh, let's see. Hopefully you can see that. It's not really picking. Let's see. 1 second. Okay. Chocolate Chip Cookie Murder by Joanne Fluke. It's the first mystery in a series, the Hannah Swenson mysteries, and this was a light, fluffy mystery compared to the other one. This is they call them cozy mysteries, and it's about a woman who owns a bakery, and she gets like sucked into investigating a murder in her small town, and it's like the drama of that is mixed in with the comedy of her mother constantly trying to set her up with different men, and how she's rebuking that. It was really good. I highly recommend that one as well. This next book I read was a comic, Giant Days, early registration. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the Giant Days comic series. I heard about this one. I initially got into the series because of BookTube, and this is like a prequel that they came out with. This one is year 1 through year 3, like a bind up, and it's about a prequel to the first comic book, about how all the characters initially met and some of their background and their family life. The art was a little bit different from what I'm used to. But I enjoyed it. It helps if you know a bit about, well, maybe you don't have to have read the comic before, but I don't think it was as of par with the other books, but it was still enjoyable. And there's another comic I read after that one. It's called Black Hammer: Secret Origins, and it was by Jeff Lemire. He has written a couple of other comics that I've enjoyed. He wrote Descender, and that's an ongoing series, like a sci-fi. But in this one, Black Hammer, it's like his take on superheroes. They're, each of these characters have their own power, and they were, like fighting evil and crime, in the past, but then somehow or another, they got like sucked into this like vortex type thing, where they're stuck in this like middle of nowhere town, and they have to act like normal people. Like no one knows that they're superheroes, no one knows they have power, so they're trying to hide it. At the same time, they're trying to get out of this town, and some of the characters have come to accept that they're going to be here forever. They're going to accept the farmer life, agricultural, small town life, but some of them just can't stand that they can't be who they were. They want to get back to the past, and so it's very intriguing. It's a different take on the superhero, because they're very like some are very they're like kind of like antagonists almost, even though they're like, I don't know, they're like really battling with the people in their town. Some of them are like, there's this one character in particular, the one on the cover. She looks like she's 6 or 7, but in her like actual, she's actually like 40 or 50 years old, and so she actually has to keep going to elementary school, and the hijinks she gets up to, it's kind of funny actually. The people who portray her mother and father, even though they aren't, that battle between that family unit was interesting. The next book I read was called Moon Called by Patricia Briggs. This is the first book in the Mercy Thompson series. This is like a shape-shifting book. She can shape-shift into a coyote. And there's vampires, there's werewolves in this book. I listened to this one on audio. It was pretty good. It's not really my cup of tea. I just thought I would try it. But yeah, if you're interested in like paranormal series, then you would probably enjoy this one. The next book I read was Secrets of the Tulip Sisters by Susan Mallory. This one I actually DNF'd. It was I think it was my second Susan Mallory. The first one I enjoyed. This one, it's about a woman who lives with, I think her name was Kelly, and she lives with her father, and she works with tulips, and her sister has been away for a really long time, since high school. And she's just come back to town, and the sisters don't get along. And so it's like their warring sibling relationship that they have going on. They're kind of like opposite personalities. Kelly is very like into the farmer lifestyle. Like, you know, she doesn't wear makeup. She doesn't keep up her hair, stuff like that. But the sister is all about her looks, her appearance. And so the sisters come back to town, and at the same time, this guy has come back in town called Griffith. His name is Griffith, and he's really interested in Kelly, but she doesn't really want a relationship with him. So but as it goes on, she's more intrigued by it, and the sister's kind of like, yeah, you should go hang out with him, get to meet him. And so it's like there. So I didn't finish the book just because I didn't like how Susan Mallory was writing the sex scenes and stuff. It wasn't really my taste. I did enjoy her other book. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but I do plan on giving her another try in the future. The next book I read was 1619. It's about Jamestown. It's called Jamestown and the Forging of American Democracy by James Horn. I listened to this one on audiobook. I read a couple of histories in the past about Jamestown. This didn't really elaborate as much as I wanted it to on the history of Jamestown. But it was enough to get my toes wet. If you're new to history and then new to what happened in Jamestown, then I would recommend this one. And the next book I read is by Debbie Macomer, called Dashing Through the Snow. I had planned on reading this one in the month of December, but it didn't come through my library in time. But I thought January, it's okay, I can still read it. It's still winter. This one was really funny. It could be intense. It was about a guy named Dash, and the woman was named, I think Ashley was her name. And it's how I don't want to give too much away, but it's like their relationship. It was really funny, like how when they first meet, they do not get along at all. The woman, Ashley, she is trying to get an airplane ticket to go to Washington to see her family for Christmas. But for some reason, I won't give this away, but for some reason she can't get a flight. And then Dash is the man behind her, also going to the same destination. And so they get up to some hijinks traveling to Washington. And it was really good. It was a perfect wintry, Christmassy read. The next book I read, a comic, is Garfield by Jim Davis. Since I'd read Charlie Brown, another recommendation was Garfield. The same type of thing where, I've seen, my exposure was through looking at, the newspaper strips, and I saw, the TV shows a couple of times, and I thought, I'll just pick this one up. I was disappointed in this one. I can't remember who the actual writer was, but it's like the creator. It was kind of deceiving. The creator was Jim Davis, but the writer was someone else. The stories, I think, this comic at least, wasn't as good as the newspaper clippings. So I plan on, oh, sorry, one second, my cat's jumping. I'm gonna knock over my phone. It wasn't as good as the original writer's comic strip. So I don't plan on continuing this series of comics, but I maybe will pick up the original comic strips. The next book I read is, let me pull it up, The Red and the Blue another history political book, The Red and the Blue, The 1990s and the Birth of Political Tribalism by Steve Kornacki. This book, I was expecting it to really dive in to the meat of what happened in the 1990s, but it really just went like step by step what happened in the 1990s, like point by point, instead of really explaining like the broad scope of like why those movements were happening. So it didn't really tick that box for me of what I was expecting. It was still really well written. I listened to this on an audiobook. It was still really well written and had tons of facts in it, but it didn't exactly take the twist out that what I wanted it to do with the material. But it was still very informative on what happened in the 90s. And then the last book I'm going to talk about is that I read in the first 15 or 16 days. I did this from January 1st to January 16th. And this is the last book I finished on January 16th, called These Truths by Jill Lepore, A History of the United States. And this is basically what it says. It's from the very beginning in the 1400s until the present day. And so with this one, there's a lot of history books of, a compendium of, like a bind-up of like the whole history of the U.S. But this one takes a twist on it. It's mainly focusing on the political side and like the religious side of what's happening. And it was so interesting. I learned a lot about the different political movements and why those shifts were happening. It really explained, how like with the Civil War, how it was like North and South, how how people were voting and why they were voting like that, like the different religious movements. It was a really good point with the 1820s and 30s and 40s, 1800s, of like this big revival religious movement, and how like all those have still, and the different characters, the different people involved who really played a big part in impacting and like taking the movements in a certain direction. So it was like an 800-page book or so, but I flew through it. I was just riveted by the writing. The writing was excellent. Jill Lepore, I looked her up, and she is a Harvard professor. So she really knows her stuff, and I really recommend that one. So these are the books I have read so far in the year, in the first part of January. Let me know if you have heard of any of these books, and I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.